All right, guys, here we go. It's the PD podcast.
All right. Getting jacked.
they're like, these guys are just a bunch of freaking crazy weirdos. They don't.
What are they doing with their hands? Why do we have inflatable tube man?
It's like, why are they doing that? But this is our PD podcast where basically we're going to answer from the questions you guys have, and also we're going to dive into a lot more about like a lot of these things. I think there's something I want to definitely like focus on a lot, and that is just when it comes to being natty and enhanced. So that's definitely going to be a main topic that I like to focus on recently, because everyone thinks there are certain things that you have to do because you're enhanced because of so many other factors, when in reality it's kind of just all the same shit. Tube man from Family Guy. All right, guys, we're doing a PD podcast. We're going to answer some of your questions and then also give some general feedbacks on stuff that we think, and then also try to give you some advice on what's helpful in terms of approaching this. I do have to say that we are not doctors. This is all just educational purposes only.
And entertainment purposes only.
And entertainment purposes.
Running like Naruto really fast.
Oh, that would be so funny. Have like a treadmill and then just do it.
Just run across the screen.
Just run across the screen. I'm gonna edit that in there for the last one.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Cool.
Well, excited to be here.
Yeah.
David, if you don't know my by now. Hello.
So what do you want to go over first, Dave? Because you're a lot more diverse into this than I am. I'm still currently learning, or it's more of this stuff, so I know like the basic of the most basic stuff.
Yeah, and I don't. So here's where I like to start, is the fundamentals of testosterone, right? Because everything's kind of derived. All anabolic steroids are derived from testosterone. So I do love to talk about that. It's definitely more scientific, but I'm going to keep it relatively high level. So we're going to talk about cholesterol. So essentially, cholesterol is broken down in the liver. You have HDL and LDL, and testosterone is literally cholesterol, but moved around. I'm not going to go into details, but basically the chains are moved around, and it is created. Show your sheet. Oh, I actually don't know where it is because my stuff has been moved around. So it essentially is cholesterol that has been moved around. That's all that it is on the chair. Oh, there we go. All right, cool. This actually kind of dumbs it down. Okay. This is going to be so hard for me to do this. All right. So it actually doesn't even talk about testosterone, but essentially you have cholesterol, goes to LDL and HDL, mostly LDL. LDL is bad cholesterol. Then you have pregnenolone, goes to progesterone. This is going to be too complicated for people. But either way, they all eventually break down. So you have cholesterol, it goes into progesterone, DHEA, estrogen. DHEA can convert into testosterone. So these are basically the chains that the liver goes through in creating it's called steroidogenesis. It's basically methylation and creation of hormones in the body. So
would that like overall be part of like the androgen receptors, of how it gets to the androgen receptors, or what?
So androgen receptors are in cells, right? So, and this may be getting a little bit complex. So testosterone is cholesterol, right? Anabolic steroids are testosterone molecule, and they are manipulated. A very common one would be the 17th molecule and then the 19th molecule, and they basically break those bonds up. Sometimes they are DHT molecules, which is dihydrolyzed testosterone. I may have messed that up, but it essentially is testosterone, and that's really it's 3 to 4 times more anabolic than testosterone. So these are kind of the fundamental pieces of steroids, is where they come from, is a testosterone molecule or a DHT molecule, I mean, you have other steroids that come from progesterone or estrogen, and you also can take those. Those are also steroids. But when you're talking about anabolic steroids, you're mainly talking about DHT and testosterone as the fundamental pieces, which a DHT is two hydrogen molecules attached to a testosterone molecule. So now when we're talking about androgen receptors, we see a lot of bad side effects from DHT. Now, DHT, a lot of those androgen receptors are close to the sebaceous glands, the nervous system. So like your spine, your scalp, your skin. So you get acne, you get hair loss. And then testosterone, a lot of it, those androgen receptors are located in your prostate. And the ones that are very located in the prostate tend to have very high anabolic factors for muscle building. In fact, it's funny because DHT, if it's produced in the body, tends to be a good correlation between, or men balding is a good correlation between muscle growth and men balding because of DHT. But if you take a DHT steroid, like Proverone is literally DHT, there is not a high yield in muscle growth from it. As interestingly as that is, they don't even think they make injectable DHT anymore. They only do the oral form, which is Proverone. We just don't use it in the US, but it is used in other countries.
So I got some questions that many people may not know, especially beginners. What are some DHT derivative steroids?
The number one that I always talk about is like Proverone. Proverone's great. And usually when you're using a DHT style steroid, you actually use it because it has a high binding affinity to androgen receptors.
Mm-hmm.
There are not two different types of androgen receptors. There is only one type of androgen receptor. It was a nomenclature issue back in the day where they actually thought there were two androgen receptors in the body. There's only one type of androgen receptor. It just depends on where it binds to, the affinity. So because Proverone has a high binding affinity, this is how they categorize steroids, is by the affinity of binding to globulin, essentially sex binding hormone. Proverone binds very heavily to these hormones. Therefore, the other steroids that you're putting into your body tend to have they are now free. If they're binded, they're not free. It's a bound testosterone. You do not get benefactors out of it. So that's kind of like when you're talking about DHT, that's kind of what it is. I mean, at a very, very high level. So we gotta did that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I was just trying to get more people in here, so I was kind of having a type up option on.
No, yeah, you're fine. You can use your phone if you need to. So we did get a question. So do we make steroids in our body naturally, or how does adding man-made affect us? All right.
Yes.
Do you want to answer that one?
No, you can go on that one. I kind of can just put my opinion on there as well.
All right, cool. Yeah, so we do naturally produce steroids. Not all of us, but we do to a degree produce these hormones because steroids are literally hormones. Like I said, cholesterol is broken down into testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, all these hormones in our body. DHT, it goes through the entire steroidogenesis process that we were talking about in the beginning. People produce more than other people. Just like growth hormone, the people that produce more growth hormone going through puberty are going to get taller. That is due to IGF-1. Growth hormone gets released to IGF-1 gets released from the growth hormone. It basically works in pulsing, and it allows I believe it's the bone cavities, if I remember correctly, to add more space so that you can grow taller. That's why if you give a young person growth hormone, it actually doesn't stop the natural production of growth hormone, but it will allow them to grow taller when they're at young ages. But once your bone cavities have been closed up, you can no longer get taller. That's why someone that's a bodybuilder that's jamming all this growth hormone no longer grows taller. So yes, and then everyone's genetically prone to either produce more or less.
That's what I was gonna infer to, is that yes, we do have these hormones in our body, but everyone kind of produce either more or less based on the genetic factor, which is also pretty interesting. It's like what allows for that to happen, where if somebody has more, more test, hormones, and then more estrogen, et cetera, et cetera.
So I'm going to actually say that this is a very environmental basis. I truly do believe that a lot of that is the environment that we grow up in. If we grow up around people like in sports, right? And we're always getting amped up before the games, and the football players are like hitting each other on the ass and stuff like that, getting ready to lift weights, crushing it, getting ready to kill people, like go out for war kind of thing. I truly do believe that you're going to produce more testosterone than not. Now, another factor that comes into it is cortisol. So stress. Stress highly affects your hormones, especially in females. Like, I'm not even going to jump into it, but most of my clients are females, actually, probably like 70 to 80% of them. And cortisol is a killer for weight, for fat loss, for estrogen, for progesterone, for testosterone. It affects all hormones, because I'm not going to go into all the loops, ins and outs about it, but that is another hormone that is detrimental if we do not control that. So lack of sleep affects your hormones drastically. And circadian rhythm, if you're day in the life, if you just stress, if you can't manage your own stress, like if you're driving on the road and like someone cuts you off, you're like, oh, and you're stressed about it all day, guess what happens? Your cortisol levels go up because your adrenal glands are firing off now, and they're shooting off epinephrine and norepinephrine to get that adrenal gland, that adrenaline pumping. And that's not a good state to constantly be in. But when we need it, we want to be able to use it. When we go and do a heavy squat, you want to get amped up. You want to get that adrenaline pumping. I get nauseous before my heavy squat sets usually. Usually I'm dry heaving. So those are kind of like some factors that go into play. I don't know if you want to add to it, but I do believe that the environmental factor is huge. We are sometimes just born not being able to produce hormones. And we see this in like hermaphrodites, for instance, right? They're a unisex organism, essentially. Not, well, unisex. I mean, I think they call it gender fluid, because they have basically two different sex organs in their body, because they were birthed with genetic flaws. I would say it's not.
Well, I wouldn't say that. It's a genetic anomaly in a sense. They were both intersex.
Yes. So, like there is a genetic component. Some people never produce a lot of testosterone, just genetically. Your chromosomes can be off. Some people never produce sperm. They just can't. Their testicles just don't work properly, or their ovaries are not working properly, and that's where medicine comes in hand, and that's where the modern medication has been phenomenal for fixing stuff. Do you always need to do it? Now we're kind of transitioning into how does man-made affect us? It cuts you off. A male taking testosterone, like your testicles turn off. Maybe not 100%, but it's pretty much close to 100% turn off. Like it's almost like taking birth control for a male. That's why it's kind of I like to use an analogy, like when it comes to birth control in females. Like, could you imagine taking a 14-year-old boy and saying, "Hey, you're on testosterone now"?
Well, I mean,
go on. Yeah, we've seen it, but like not in a good way, But it's just kind of like mind blowing. Like birth control is a hormone; it is a steroid. So it is conceptually the same thing. It's just different sexes that we're talking about at that point. It turns off when you take testosterone, it stops your luteinizing hormone, which produces semen, and then it stops your FSH, which produces sperm. So now we're pretty much close to sterile. You probably don't go 100% sterile, but very close to it. I know plenty of people that have gotten people pregnant while being on testosterone. So,
and also I think one thing that our viewers would kind of like to know is like, what's the effect it has on like muscle gain versus a natural and an enhanced athlete.
Oh, man.
The main thing is cortisol. Cortisol is probably like the main reason why being an enhanced would help greatly, because it kind of like reduce the amount of cortisols per se. Not necessarily reduce it, but like it. Sorry, go on.
You control your hormones. Like you're artificially controlling your hormones. The benefactor of even being on testosterone replacement therapy, even going very, very super physiological, right? like 200 milligrams. Most people go a little bit super physiological, not by much, but a little bit. Some people go a little bit higher than others. And cortisol negatively affects sex hormone often, though. Yes, it does. But the benefactor of it is, even if you are stressed, like your cortisol levels are just jacked, right? You're not producing testosterone and you artificially replace it, you can control that. So it's mainly like handicapping that issue, right? You're masking the issue, but the root cause is actually your cortisol levels. So you actually need to correct your cortisol levels. Maybe you artificially enhance your hormones while you fix the cortisol levels, and then you come back off testosterone. So the question was, how is muscle growth different on testosterone versus not being on testosterone? Well, it depends where your natural levels are. If your natural levels are close to 1,000 as a male, you're probably just fine building muscle. Like, you probably don't have too much issue, as long as you don't have too much sex binding globulin. So if all that testosterone that you have is bound, then you're not going to get a lot of free testosterone in your bloodstream, meaning that your muscle growth probably won't be that great. You also have to look at DHT conversion. Everyone's going to be genetically different. Usually, if you had acne when you were a kid, you probably can build muscle a little bit easier than other males. If you start balding, you can probably build muscle a little bit easier. So those are like just genetic components that kind of tie in with those hormones. Now, as far as muscle building goes, honestly, I have always been one that can, I've always been one to build muscle very easily, naturally. I was a natural athlete for a very, very long time until I was in my mid-20s. And so I had years and years of experience being natural. Like, I went from 135. The peak that I ever reached naturally was 215 pounds. And I got up to over 200 pounds within a 3-year span of time. After 4 years or 5 years, I was around 210, 215. So I have never had an issue, but there are people that have issues. There are some people that just don't produce testosterone. Now, when you're taking testosterone, it is an anabolic. Like, there are anabolic properties. It's not an anabolic steroid, but there are anabolic properties to testosterone, allowing you to build more muscle. It increases recovery time. The water retention, it increases more estrogen production. Estrogen is great for building muscle because testosterone converts to, you aromatize it, and it converts 5-alpha, not 5-alpha for dark phase, converts to estrogen, which can help you produce, even helps with IGF-1 production. So building muscle is easier when you're on testosterone, definitely. When you're talking about anabolic steroids, it's even easier, because when you hear this term bigger, stronger, faster, it doesn't necessarily make you faster, but it allows those muscle fibers to actually grow back stronger. So when it recovers, think about it going from like almost like a string, right, that you twine really hard, to, like, if you look at a crane and they have the metal string that's twined, it's kind of like the difference. Like, so it makes the actual muscle fiber stronger. It permanently kind of like alters that muscle because it grows so much stronger. And that's the point to anabolic steroids, is to prevent muscle atrophy. That's the number one reason why most of these steroids were created, was to prevent people that have muscular dystrophy disorders, so that your muscle doesn't waste away.
Yeah, and the one thing I kind of want to make sure that it's correct with you, Dave. Like, I think when I was younger, I came to the realization, like, yeah, you can be on PEDs, and essentially, I think the only difference in there, besides other factors, is the ability that it has to help you recover better. Do you think that makes a huge role in, like, how much muscle gain that person is going to make, or not?
Yes. So on that note, I am a firm believer that anabolic steroids are only there to enhance. Steroids, period, are to enhance. And it increases your recovery time. So if you cannot train harder from natural, train harder being unnatural versus natural, then you're not going to see the growth that you think you're going to see. Will you get bigger and stronger and faster while you're on it? Yes. When you come off, are you going to see actual muscle growth? No. Do you lose your lean tissue? No. Unless if your hormones can't reboot and you go hypogonadism. So while you're on it, you increase protein synthesis, And that's one of the big factors, is that you can recover faster because of this. So you want to take advantage of this. You want to be eating 100% of your diet. You want to be eating more than 100% of your diet. Like, you want to be going above and beyond, because your metabolic rate's now increased. Your protein synthesis is increased. You can utilize all these things now. That's really where enhancement comes in. You recover faster, so you can train more frequently. You can train harder. And if you're not doing those fundamental pieces, then it makes no sense to do it. No sense. Like, it is about recovery. And that's what enhancement is for. Yes, you do get super physiological appearances to you, but when you come off, that goes away. Even in going on to TRT, right? From a cycle, like if you're blasting and then cruising, you do lose that swelling and that inflammation of those cells, or the vascularity, which may not be a bad thing. Sometimes that's high blood pressure and stuff like that. So there are side effects that come with them too. So yeah. How many rest days should you take while you're enhanced? That's a really good question. And another, genetic dependency. So some natural athletes, by the way, can recover faster than unnatural athletes. And some people can train literally 2 days and they're perfectly fine, right? Like, I mean, you can probably speak to it too.
So honestly, this is pretty much common sense. not to like sound like an a-hole, but like, if you know that you as a natural can train like ridiculously hard, but you're not like recovered like within 24 to 48 hours, just don't train within that 24 to 48 hours. But if you know that like, hey, you just hit chest, but all of a sudden like 24 to 48 hours, you're like, all right, my chest is really not that sore and I feel like I can go again, then I mean, yeah, you can train again that much amount of time. You essentially have to gauge your recovery. Like, no scientific data is going to be like, hey man, this is what you have to do, this is the need and the must, you have to train every 24 to 48 hours just to get recovery. Like, everybody is different. Like, your recovery may not be the same as somebody else. But as an enhance, that exact same thing apply. You can be on a lot of like PEDs, but at the end of the day, there you can only recover for such a period of time. Like, if you just smash chest ridiculously and you find yourself not recovering within that 24 to 48 hours, I mean, I wouldn't go in there and do chest again, because you're just creating more inflammation and also spiking up cortisol level, which kind of will hinder your recovery. So it all depends on you. Honestly, like, again, if you can't recover and you're not able to recover in a certain time period, then just don't go train. In fact, hit something else. But it's all dependent on you.
Yeah, so I agree with that. That's enhanced versus not enhanced as well. Now, when you're enhanced, you should be able to be pushing more volume, pushing more weight, lifting more. So your overall volume attribution within a week compounds over time. So you should go to lift more and more and more and more number wise. I'm just talking simple numbers. And then that means that you are still and you're still recovering within your normal time frame, meaning that you're enhancing your recovery because you're now actually getting more and more and more and more volume, and all this is compounding up over time. That's really, I think, where the attribution of muscle over time comes in when being enhanced versus non-enhanced, is actually due to the fact that the recovery times are just faster. So you can push more volume more consistently over a period of time. Therefore, you add up to gaining more hypertrophy over time, more muscle growth over time. And that's kind of where it all compounds up over time. It's not like you're going to hit a cycle and you're going to gain 20 pounds of muscle. I mean, I've seen people do it, but I mean, it's like, you're still a genetic anomaly, which like I was going to say, you're a genetic anomaly if that happens. And there you go. Now, my first cycle though, I did gain like 15 pounds of muscle in like 3 to 4 months. I don't know if it's probably 3 months. I don't think it was that long. And like, I gained tons of muscle and it didn't go anywhere. Everyone's like, oh, I lost all my gains after I came off, yada, yada, yada. I didn't lose anything. I mean, yeah, like you lose like the artificial look that you get, but I never lost my muscle. And I try to explain that to people. You don't lose lean tissue. You just lose that swelling of the cells and stuff like that, and the extra water retention that you get.
Before we go to like the next question about like the recovery based on prep and how many off days you should take, I just want to say, like, my first legit cycle, I went from like 165 to like 210.
But I would like,
I wouldn't
But
say
like
that's all muscle mass, but like mainly some water there. But like it was like a lean, like 210.
but like when you came off, where were you at?
Probably like
At same composition.
95 body composition wise. So
Body
I didn't
composition
really
if it was the
I
same.
didn't really came off per se, but I cruised right after because I was like I knew I was going to rebuild it and I was going to be competitive in the long run. So
Right.
I was right after, and when I cruised, kind of went down to like 195 to 210, which is kind of sometimes where I'm usually around roughly almost like every year for the last 5, 6, 7 years.
So we're
But
talking like a 30-pound jump, essentially, is what
it's
you got.
essentially, yeah,
It,
it's
it
like,
can happen. Keep in mind, everyone, Paul is a genetic anomaly. It can
well,
happen. I've seen it happen. I've seen their first cycles in prep, and they like a genetic anomaly situation again, where they put on 20 pounds in a prep in a massive caloric deficit, and
yeah.
their composition was better. So it was literally lean 20 pounds a gain. And it happens, but it's usually only that first cycle. Like I've never seen anyone.
Yeah, after that, never happened after that. It was just like, all right, that's not going to happen anymore. But for contest prep, rests, how many rests that you should take for contest prep? It's actually the exact same thing, but now you have a different factor, caloric deficit. So that's kind of where things are going to be a little crazy. If you're a natural and you're in a caloric deficit and you're trying to figure out how to like maximize recovery, you might want to find ways where you can kind of recover properly before you can train again. You also have to think about, yeah, you're in a caloric deficit, man, and you're not on any specific hormones to help support or progress your recovery. So you have to like create your program in a way where there's enough room for recovery. For enhanced, I think it's honestly the exact same thing. I mean, you may get away with a lot more than the natural individual, but at the same time, you have to be able to take into the fact that you are in a caloric deficit, and your main goal when you're enhanced during contest prep is to maintain lean muscle tissue mass throughout the entire time.
Yep. Okay. So in prep, for a natural guy, one thing I'd recommend is marijuana or CBD. No, I'm not joking, man. Like it helps a lot for recovery. It relaxes the body. You can get your circadian rhythm. You can keep it in check. So like post workout, bring yourself back into a parasympathetic state as fast as you can. So cortisol levels yet again will help with that. Controlling those cortisol levels, the best thing that you can do for any individual on a prep is helping with cortisol levels. But being a natural, that's definitely one thing that will help. You're being a natural athlete, because I have done it both ways, your testosterone levels will drop off, your hormones will drop off. And that's the disadvantage that a natural athlete has, is the fact that your hormones do not get regulated as easily because you're not artificially inflating them. So you'll probably experience muscle loss. Being enhanced, you probably won't experience muscle loss. And if you think that you're experiencing muscle loss, I doubt you're experiencing muscle loss. It's probably that you're just flattening out. I have experienced muscle loss while on PEDs before, and it hurts. It hurts really badly, and you smell like shit all the time. Like you smell like toxic chemicals, and that's, I think it's ammonia that you give off. It's either ammonia or like chloride smell. I can't remember, but it's a chemical smell that you actually give off when you burn muscle. When you're enhanced, it's very difficult to do it. So like people just complain a lot of times.
Yeah. And
Balin Masper, thank you so much for the raid. I really appreciate it. Now, on that note, we were talking about prep. So with enhancement in prep, how fast is your recovery time? Well, me at least, because I don't do really anything in the off season that much, when I go into enhancement and I start to push really hard, my volume of my weights will increase. Valen, I really appreciate it again, man. Appreciate the raid. And that being said, is I'm pushing more volume, so my recovery time is actually increasing as you're reducing calories. And thank you for the follow too. So that it makes so much noise.
I have no idea what's going on right now.
I just got a follow, and he just rated us with 9 people. So either way, that being said, is when you're enhancing, increasing volume, your recovery time is theoretically again increasing because you are now enhanced, and your protein synthesis is increased. As long as you're keeping your protein intake up and the protein is being utilized for recovery factors, which it will be because now you are enhanced, it makes a huge difference. So that is where I kind of will leave it, because I was increasing in my volume over time. I had 1 extra day of training a week. So I went from 4 days a week of training to 5 days a week of training, and more volume in those 5 days, like a lot more volume. So like the 4 days were more volume, and then adding that 5th day in, it was a ton more. And I increased in volume over that period of time until I was 4 weeks out from the show, where I really kind of hit that really hard wall, and my volume started to reduce down. My recovery time started to reduce down. I still kept the 5 days a week in there because my cardio and stuff like that wasn't being changed 4 weeks out. It actually stayed steady after that point. So like, again, it's very similar to off season versus on season. It's just, you're in a caloric deficit, like Paul was saying.
So that's interesting. When I was natural, I actually train the exact same way now, and the same way that I trained when I was natural, because I knew the importance of rest. But I also realized something when I was younger. It's that I know it sounds weird and people are not going to believe me. Maybe I just have a good response. But low volume training programs are super effective, enhanced or natty, when you're in a caloric deficit. Because when you push that like high ridiculous amount of volume during a caloric deficit and you are a natural, there's going to be a certain point where you just can't handle all that volume over a long period of time. And if you're also enhanced and you push like a ridiculously high amount of volume, you're also going to sacrifice muscle mass. Because like I've always just believed, just train hard and heavy, because when you do train hard and heavy, you're eventually going to increase your numbers progressively, gradually over time, retain some muscle mass or build whatever muscle you can while you're enhanced. And it's the same thing for being a natural. It's like you may not have the same recovery as an enhanced individual, but if you have those low volume in there in your routine, you could still lift the most maximum amount of weight while at the same time recruiting more muscle fibers, applying progressive overload, and then gradually growing literally into your show.
And that's actually exactly what I'm the same way. I've always been a hard, heavy lifter.
Yeah.
I like 2 working sets, usually like 2 hard working sets, sometimes 3. It just depends on where I am, how I'm feeling. 4 seems to be a bit much usually for me, unless if like one of those 4 sets is not like an all out set. But yeah, no, I do like that principle of training. I like heavy compound movements. Now, the reason why I like it more than anything else is not only to feed our egos, because as males, we like to feed our egos, but the simple fact that you get to see progress over a period of time. So I actually got this principle when I was watching Dallas. I loved it. Dallas McCarver, when he was prepping for the Arnold,
Yeah.
they track basically, he had a goal of hitting X number on squats. I don't know if it was like 600 or 700 pounds. Probably 700 pounds, and deadlifting like 700 pounds also, something ridiculous like that. And he said it was fun going through his prep, because he was always trying to hit these numbers, or always trying to progress. And that's actually the reason why I like it, is because I love like seeing progress. And like I said, it feeds our egos, but it's also not bad for us. Like, and you end up growing into the show as the volume's increasing. So I've also noticed like you get denser, the actual true denseness of the muscles stay there, and that's how you build dense muscle mass, is with hard and heavy training. I think the reason why the 90s bodybuilders don't look balloony like they do nowadays is just due to the fact that the hard and heavy training. And I think that people like bodybuilders have definitely switched back into that hard and heavy training style, and if they haven't, then they're being left in the dust. Because there was a time period where like people were switching over to a ton of machines. The only one that really did it really successful, because he was doing hard and heavy training for a while, was Jay Cutler. And on the tail end of his career, he switched over to like a lot of machines and stuff like that. And I maybe Phil Heath did something similar. I think he stayed away from squats. I don't know. He doesn't post a lot of his training, but I know Jay Cutler went to a lot of machines later on, but he was still training hard and heavy, and that's how he built his dense muscle. Every old school bodybuilder that built dense muscle was based off the basic principles of training.
And it was also, I think it was back in like 2008 and 2010, majority of all the bodybuilders at that point were always doing like, or at least the muscle magazines were just like, do like 4 sets of like 15 to 20 for high reps to be able to like preserve your muscle mass. That does not make any sense. Like that literally did not make a single shred of sense to me whatsoever. It's like, if you're in a caloric deficit, even though you're a bodybuilder and you can still like train hard and like for a longer period of time, like why would you have higher volume while you're in a caloric deficit when you could just train the heaviest amount of movements that you can for a simple 1 to 2 set and then just like go on to the next one. This way you have more time to spend recovering, and then you can make the most out of your gains and still feel like everything is work. I mean, if you're enhanced, like the pumps are going to be good once you're doing like a ridiculously heavy set. So I looked at those back in the day and I'm like, this does not make any sense. So I didn't follow it.
It's funny because if you look at your veins in your body, including your upper body, like after a hard, heavy squat, like super, like I'm talking like a true intense squat, you will become more vascular, more pumped up in your entire body than any other movement. Because there's so much stress load that your body is having to adjust to, and the blood flow just gets increased to the whole body. And it's just that heavy stress. And I mean, Dorian Yates was one of a kind, and all he did was super hard and heavy training all the time. And I mean, he eventually tore his body up towards the end, but I mean, how many Olympias did he win? Exactly.
Yeah, so did Ronnie.
Ronnie, there you go. Exactly.
Yeah, but there's always a place for a high volume and low volume. Is you just got to dictate when to use it. It's not like I'm like preaching, hey, you have to use low volume all the time. Like you just have to figure out a way that eventually you can start from low volume and then gradually work your way up to a higher amount of volume to be able to adapt to it. And eventually you can just drop the set every like deload or whatever and then start all over again and then keep on increasing volume pressure with new numbers.
Yeah, so I do like high volume training max once a week, usually like one muscle group I'll pick and I'll do like, or maybe twice a week max, where I'll do like a super set or a cluster set or something like that. But it's very hard on the central nervous system anyways. Not say like, everything's hard on my central nervous system with the way that I train for the most part. If I'm going all out, but that being said, there is definitely a time and a place for it. So don't get us wrong. Like, it should be incorporated into your programming of some sort. I like it once or twice a week. It just depends on your recovery time because it can shoot your recovery in the foot.
Yeah. And then now to just more PED entertainment stuff that we kind of like flew off of for a bit. Anybody got any like questions and stuff like that they want to ask about like PEDs? Because I know it's everyone's favorite topic on the internet. The fact that we have this all set up so people can ask about them and learn a little bit more, and nobody's doing it. It's like
very, very true.
But yet when like something goes up and they're like, oh, you must be this, but you can't really say that when you don't have the general idea of like what causes that.
So I can talk just about aromatizer inhibitors.
Yeah, we could actually do that. Actually,
okay. So one thing, tren is overrated, by the way. If you're trying to grow muscle, you don't need tren. So that's just a very basic one. DECA, I think, is a great drug. It's still an FDA-approved drug. Let's see. I'm just kind of going down the list. I think MAST is an underrated drug. Primo is an underrated drug if you can find
Primo, if you can find a good Primo.
If you can find a good Primo source, it's a good drug.
I've actually never tried Primo.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to find like real stuff. Like, I mean, it's they make it over in Europe, so in the US is very uncommon. Let's see. Yeah, that kind of covers like basic, like super high level stuff. EQ is a mild drug that you get good results from. So if you're talking like about like anabolic ratios and stuff like that, you can get just as much out of these other drugs than you can out of tren. Tren is still tren, and that's kind of like the funny thing I say, tren is tren is tren. But it's not like needed. I think like maybe close to shows, like it's definitely something that comes into the equation. But like off season, I mean, why would you do something that's detrimental to your mental well-being and your physical health if you don't need to? That's just my standpoint. You're doing it for the recovery factor. So then I'm going to transition into AIs, which is something that I love this topic. And we were talking about it earlier. Aromatizer inhibitors are way overused. And now I'm going to talk about a study, Paul, that I was talking to you about before we kicked off this podcast. So they have done studies on people that are on testosterone replacement therapy, 200 milligrams per week. They have had people, they basically had a group that was just on testosterone replacement therapy and a group that was on testosterone replacement therapy and aromatizer inhibitor. I believe the drug that was used was Arimidex in that study. their HDL, so their good cholesterol, dropped 25%. 25%. Like, that's big. As far as cholesterol go, that's big, because like if you have HDL around like 60 to 70, that's really good HDL. Now, knock 25% off that. That's not a big number anymore. You're talking like 40-ish, 45-ish, which is probably normal for a lot of people anyways. So like if you have it in the 60s, 70s, that's phenomenal. But that being said, is like, it's not, if you're not aromatizing very heavily, then you don't need it. In fact, like I think a better drug, or a more mild drug than like Arimidex, would be Nolvadex, or tamoxifen, as some people call it, for controlling estrogen control. Now it depends. Like if you're getting gynecomastia, obviously you need something like an aromatizer inhibitor. But that's a genetic component that comes into play. So it also has been proven that if you're taking aromatizer inhibitors and you reduce your estrogen, your IGF-1 level corresponds. There's a correlation between IGF-1 and estrogen. So you're taking an aromatizer inhibitor, you're reducing your IGF-1, and IGF-1 is phenomenal for muscle growth. Well, theoretically, it's phenomenal. It can lead to muscle growth. It leads to soft tissue reproduction and stuff like that. So those are things that I think are under talked about. People take letrozole and completely bottom out their estrogen. People take combined letrozole and Arimidex and Aromacin. I think Aromacin is probably the best aromatizer inhibitor out there that is really not used that frequently. It's very, very strong. It's short acting, but it does what it needs it to do. So, but it's completely different than letrozole or Arimidex. And letrozole and Arimidex are the two kind of that are go-tos. I don't know if it's because in the FDA system, Arimidex is maybe a cheaper drug. It's very possible. And maybe letrozole is a cheaper drug. So those are kind of the go-tos. But yeah, I see these competitors. I see females taking letrozole and Arimidex and all this stuff, and they're not even on things that are aromatizing. Like who, like why? You know, like I understand like bringing down your estrogen a little bit, but why are you going to bottom out your estrogen and take something that stops aromatization? For fat loss, you want lower estrogen, but you don't want low estrogen. It kills your sex drive and everything like that. So those are like, I'm not saying like don't have something on hand in case, because if you're going to get gynecomastia, it kind of comes relatively quickly. It basically it calcifies the oh my gosh, what's the gland called? It's basically the gland under the nipple. Either way, but it basically becomes a calcium ball. Very interesting. Congrats on your bodybuilding career. I'm going for a bath. Hey, thanks so much for tuning in, man. I appreciate the raid as well. I look forward to having you tune in, hopefully on a weekly basis. We'll be doing this every Sunday.
Yeah, so there is something I want to like say about like AIs and whatnot, which is the compensating aspect of it. Sorry, it's been a long day.
You're gonna have to repeat.
So
what you just
essentially,
said.
if people can't use AIs during like the last few weeks of prep, or just even when they're like on a blast, what would you recommend?
People are not using AIs.
Yeah, like what would you recommend that would kind of give the exact same effect? Like let's say, I think nowadays when most people use AIs just to counteract the water retention and some gynecomastia issues. But other than that, I don't really see much of a benefit if those are the main two reasons.
So I like DIM. DIM is phenomenal, but like when you're talking about competition prep, you're running heavier duty drugs, DIM is not going to cut it. DIM does help like in the off season, especially if you're not blasting. Like if you're on TRT, there's a conjunction of like things that help with estrogen control, DIM being one of them. You should pretty much optimize your liver because your liver helps to metabolize estrogen. 50% of your E2, which is estradiol, which is the major one that gets converted from testosterone into estrogen, is going to be your E2 levels. It helps with 50% of the metabolism of it, and then you excrete it out. So you also have to have your GI tract working where you can actually excrete the estrogen out, which is something that people don't talk about, or else it gets recycled into the body, and that's not what you want. So optimizing the liver. I like I said, I like tamoxifen better than aromatizer inhibitors, unless if you actually need them. So there's only so much you can do to counteract chemicals, especially in higher dosages, which I know people run higher dosages going to preps. I'm not like crazy on dosages going to preps, but like they're higher, for sure. What's up,
So
Almighty?
what if you're to use something like Mastrion, for example?
Masteron's a great option. Absolutely a great option for controlling your estrogen. I think that's a better option than using AIs. So people that go on blast and stuff like that, Mast would be a great option to help control those side effects. Like I said, you don't want to be relying on AIs because of the negative effect that it has on your lipid levels. Not everyone experiences those negative side effects on the lipids, but it's pretty drastic on your lipid count. And testosterone alone, so I didn't actually talk about this, but testosterone alone, when you're going from 200 milligrams, they did a study where they go from 200 milligrams to 300 milligrams of testosterone, and it reduced their HDL yet again by around 20-ish%, 25%. And then they actually took it a step further and they did a study with 600 milligrams. Now, they can't do these studies for that long because it's not unethical, but then they took it from 200 milligrams up to 600 milligrams. And they found approximately the same ratio from 300 milligrams to 600 milligrams of the reduction in the HDL count. So your cholesterol, yet again. So it seems like the threshold for affecting your cholesterol negatively, so pressure on the heart and plaque buildup, is relatively on the low end. So once you break that, once you breach that, you do potentially have plaque buildup getting created over time. That builds over time. So it's not going to be an overnight thing.
Yeah. Awesome. So that's kind of what I kind of want to figure it out, because I know a lot of people use Mast, but they also use like AIs as well while using Mast. And I just want to know what like are the potential side effects of just using multiple compounds of AIs without realizing they're using multiple compounds of AIs.
Well, Mast is not an AI. Mast is an anabolic steroid. It
But
works
it does
differently.
have some AI protective benefits.
It does have benefits, yes. The way that it works is it will help you with estrogen control, 100%. And so it's not necessarily an AI. So AI still may be needed, but hopefully not as much to the point where you don't need to take an AI anymore. Maybe you can do like a Nolvadex or DIM or something like that to help control those estrogen side effects to metabolize it. Metabolization of estrogen is really what you want to kind of like look at when it comes to estrogen control, not using a drug.
So my final question is like, let's say it's contest prep. Well, not even contest prep. Let's say it's whatever it is that you're doing, but like you have testosterone in there. Could you potentially use testosterone to like a minor dose of test to be able to give you some extra protective benefits towards conversion to like gynecomastia and all those other issues?
Say that one more time because I need to make sure that I'm hearing that question
Okay.
right.
Okay. So let's say you're using like a low dose of test, right?
Okay.
And you need it for like some protective benefits, like say 200 milligrams of testosterone, for example. Would that increase your overall estrogen production to where you need to get an AI, or will that just maintain your estrogen production leveled out to where you don't need an AI?
All depend on the person. Let's say their testosterone levels are lower than it was at 200 milligrams of testosterone, which most likely it was, and they're a person that aromatizes heavily, then they still may have estrogen issues. Most people, from my relative experience, will not have estrogen issues at 200 milligrams of testosterone. But I'd probably say, in my personal experience, like 30 to 40% can have estrogen issues at 200 milligrams of testosterone. So mitigating, optimizing that liver and the metabolism of estrogen is going to come into play. Going to a show yet again, you're probably going to want to do something to lower your estrogen levels, not lower the estrogen levels to like bottom it out like a lot of people do, but just lower it to get that harder, drier look so that you can drop that extra body fat if your estrogen levels are too high. So it's all about keeping that balance.
And that comes to my final question. Let's say you're a few weeks out from prep and you decide to take testosterone. Would that be beneficial or would that be counterproductive?
It would absolutely be beneficial, 100% beneficial. Yeah, without a doubt in my mind, because you're basically artificially controlling your hormones at that point yet again. And the issue with natural guys is their testosterone levels can drop off. And there's been studies time and time again where like they do their own blood work and stuff like that just to see what happens during a prep and their hormones. If you're not producing testosterone, you're not able to retain that muscle. Testosterone has myostatin inhibiting properties, which is a hormone. Myostatin is a hormone that will actually eat muscle. And it is something that as we get older, we produce more myostatin because we no longer needing to hunt and to gather to keep people alive. That's what our children are supposed to do theoretically. So we release more myostatin because our testosterone levels lower, our myostatin increases. So if we can keep our testosterone levels higher, we don't release as much myostatin.
So this goes back to what we started off at the very beginning of there being an environmental factor when it comes to how much testosterone one would produce based on their environmental situations. So you did talk about like the going out to hunt and overall how that increases higher testosterone production because it's a need to survive and to get food and stuff like that. Do you think currently right now in our generation, when we talk about like increased testosterone level, do you think that has increased, or has that our total testosterone level on average has decreased because there's not that need to go out and go for a hunt or survive or find something to survive in a sense?
So
it's not that drive.
Overall, if we look at our general populace, they're bigger and stronger than they used to be. Why? That's because of the hormones we're putting in our foods. So we're secondhand getting hormones no matter what. There are lots of steroids used in general agriculture right now, in meats. And that's why I believe that people are getting those secondhand effects. They're actually getting effects from steroids, and their hormones are actually being affected, whether it's positive or negative. I believe it's more of the negative side, 100% more of the negative side, because it's not what we're supposed to be doing. And that's just to get the chickens bigger or the cows bigger, whatever it may be, right? The trends using cows to get the cattle bigger, like more muscle, so that they can get more meat out of it. So I believe that it is trending on the upwards. But what I will say is the need for hunting and gathering has lowered. So when you're talking about maybe sports, for instance, as long as sports teams exist with these young kids and they are eating the quality of food, they're going to be bigger and stronger than earlier generations. But I will say this past year has changed my thought process on that, considering that social distancing is a thing. There's a natural instinct for males to be that alpha, to take that female, to show her that they are the strongest male out there, that is being removed currently from society because everyone is accepting everyone for everything. Every loser is still a winner, right? There isn't that need to be a champion mindset. And I think that actually will have a negative impact. In fact, social distancing along with wearing masks and not being able to read facial interactions is a very detrimental thing to young people, not us, but the younger society, I think, can have a negative impact over time. We'll see. I don't know. That's just like off theory, but we're still talking about the food. And then Caroline tuned in.
So just more question on that. If we're essentially, let's say, quote unquote, I mean, science can say, hey, they're not like injecting hormones into these foods or whatever. Somebody may say they are, whatever you believe. But let's say they are, essentially. Doesn't that mean pretty much everyone is currently enhanced?
Yeah, like actually Caroline made a joke about it earlier today when she's asking questions. So someone's like, "Are you natty, bro?" Like to her, and
yeah,
no one's natty anymore.
yeah,
no one's natty.
Because if you take all those in there, like in account, when there's like hormones in our food and stuff like that, and then we're just constantly eating like hormones from like outside our natural body, essentially that would put a lot of people at a higher hormone levels than usual, or less hormones than usual based on whatever it is that they're eating.
Hell yeah, brother. All the steroids.
It's really all food has evolved. Yeah, so that's so interesting because I didn't want to tie up with that. Also a good topic to have on your dating and relationship podcast with your wife. Talk about the aspect of like males not being that not as like that masculine individual to take lead in certain like dating scenes or relationship, and how that sexual polarity can sometimes damage relationship because one individual is not being like the dominant one or the submissive one. There's nothing wrong with being like a dominant masculine male, and there's also nothing wrong with being like a feminine submissive male. But once these roles are flipped, eventually you start seeing these little patterns and these little problems that go on there.
That is an awesome subject. It's something that we talked. Caroline's dying laughing, but it's something that we've talked about because I am very alpha. I am very dominant in the bed and not in the bed, right? He's still masculine. Yeah, I'm extremely masculine. I've tried to like, no joke, like I've like tried to like let her dominate me before, and it's like I'm like, fuck no, like instantly, hell no.
And this is
there's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah,
but there's nothing wrong with it, but it's just like, yeah, you know, like it's just
you
like
don't
that.
Always pursue me, I'm dead.
Yeah, I mean that's okay. Like I don't like always need to. I know that I know
that's
who I
am. That's actually a more dominant trait to have, because when you have that trait, you'll understand that you don't need to go chase after every single individual or woman that you see, but it's the fact that you hold yourself centered ground as the masculine individual that they will always come to you.
Yep. That's very true. I think there was actually someone that I just heard, like basically explaining how
that's true.
like women are looked down upon when they're sleeping around versus males are not. And it actually comes up from like basically like nomadic society, caveman society, where like if a female is sleeping around, no one wanted to be with you, right? And because like we're supposed to impregnate a female that we want to be with, that no one wants to be with. It is a natural selection mechanism that we have. Part of the problem is women are taking lead. Yes, part of the problem is that women are taking lead. There is an window, which is actually something that like, Caroline realizes because she's very intelligent. She's very, very intelligent. And she's very business savvy. So she has to remind herself and to ground herself and to maintain that feminine side, because like if she gets too masculine, it is a turnoff for me. Our sex life will not be as good. Like our relationship in general will not be as good if she gets too masculine. So she has to have that fine balance. And it's important for a woman as well as a man to understand that. Like it's okay to be cheesy and romantic as a man, absolutely, right? But you have to be still strong. It's kind of like when we hear the saying like, no women want a nice guy, right? That's not true. Women want a nice guy, but you've got to have that balance. You need to be nice, but you also have to be like stern when you need to be stern. Yeah. Here are my balls.
I do want to touch up on what she just said about the part of the problem is women taking the lead. That is the problem when you're in a society that essentially drives that women are supposed to take the lead. They're supposed to do this. It actually pressures women to be able to put themselves in that situation, that it actually messes up like the relationship aspect of life in general. Because like if women are always consistently like working, taking that alpha lead, eventually they don't need the man to be able to provide and do what needs to be done. But at the same time, when they do take that lead, now they have the choice to be taking both the feminine and the masculine lead all into one, and then one of them is just not naturally towards them. And then that's where the problem becomes, and then that's when they start feeling like, oh, I don't need any man in my life.
Yeah, it has to do with the equality factor, you know, that everyone wants equality, like genders want equality and stuff like that, which we should get equality as far as like jobs go. Yeah, of course, right? But at the end of the day, like a lot of women, like that I know personally that have been very, very successful in like life in general and very happy, they hit a point in their career where they can be like directors and even VPs and stuff like that, but they actually take a step backwards and like, I want to be a mother. I want to be there for my children. And then there are some that are just super career driven. And I see the kind of opposite where they have issues in their relationship and stuff like that, whether they show it or not. There's a reason why they're at work nonstop, is because they are having issues in their personal lives. And there's nothing against them, right? Like That's just how they. All right, see you later, Almighty. So yeah, David needs to clean for me today. No, that's not my job. Not just
That's actually a really good example where she says like David needs to clean for her today. There's two ways to go on about that. You can already were supposed to clean what you were supposed to do, David.
no, it wouldn't bleed my own blood.
Or two, David can say, yeah, I need to clean, but then there's something else that kind of needs to balance that. You can't just be like, every time Carolyn says like, hey, David, you need to clean every single day. That puts her in more of a masculine role. And then David just ends up becoming the feminine role.
She's
Oh,
really
I
liking
did
this
it on
conversation.
purpose. I actually just created a new
Podcast.
new recording.
That's phenomenal. Let's just keep it going at this rate.
Yeah, dude. I just created a new recording because me and Charles were actually trying to dive into this. And
nice.
Yeah, it's like an interesting thing that most people don't really talk about, because it's like one of those like topic where like, oh, if you talk about this, you're a woman hater, you're a man hater.
Nah.
That's
the issue. I was just talking about how sensitive society has gotten. And it has nothing to do with us hating on society or being pressuring one gender over the other gender. It has to do with where we're coming from. Yeah, society is changing, but there's a reason why we're kind of built and manufactured in the way that we are and how our brains process stuff. There was an Asian girl I talked to like a really, really long time ago, right? And never got serious or anything. But the Asian girl said, I will not date Asian guys because they go to Lush and I won't even go to Lush. And she's talking about how feminine that culture has gotten. And she was Korean. How feminine the culture has gotten for the males. And it used to be a very dominant culture of the males. Like the woman took care of them, they took care of the children, they cooked for them, they cleaned for them, they did everything for them, right?
Guys go to work, be like the leader of the house, do what needs to be protect, provide for the family, and then this way you have like a balanced relationship and balanced marriage, and then there wasn't that much of a complication, especially if you go all the way back in like the 1940s, 1950s, and 60s. You probably didn't see much of that back then than you would now, because like the family structure is so like all over the place.
So she said, tell everyone how you got your teeth and face done on the trip. So I had some fine lines and I got them touched up on Botox. And then I randomly in Mexico decided to get my teeth done also. I actually gritted. So for you lifters out there, wear a retainer because I literally snapped parts of my front teeth off. And sure enough, down in Mexico, you'll like this story, Paul. I'll jump into the whole story.
Yeah,
we're up there and we're getting Botox on. I'm like, actually, I'm just curious. Do you know like a good dentist by any chance? He's like, oh yeah, the best. I'm like, all right. And this guy seems very intelligent so far and like very comfortable, very weird office. I won't lie, but a very, very good, like the best that we've experienced. And so get done. And then the dentist comes up when I'm sitting on the chair and he's like, let me see your teeth. He's like, we can throw some veneers on there. Absolutely. He's like, come down when you're done. I'm like, wait, just downstairs? He's like, yeah, just downstairs. And this is the owner of the dentist spot. I didn't even know it. I thought it was one of the dentists. And so I go downstairs. I'm like, yeah, like if you look at it, yeah, we actually need to shave down the teeth and put some crowns on it. And then, well, he didn't say shave it down. He's like, yeah, we need to put crowns in these too, but you should probably do your whole smile line. And so I don't realize how invasive this is, right? So it ends up being 4 crowns and 2 veneers. So from here all the way in, so from the canines in. And all that I needed was my 2 front teeth fixed. But the issue is the coloring will change over time on the natural teeth versus the unnatural teeth. So either way, I go back the next day and they clean my teeth, and that was included in the price. And meanwhile, it was really cheap, right? By the way, for like all this to get done, very, very cheap. Like I'm talking like 1 tooth would have cost me the price of 6 in America. So if you need a good dentist, I got you. But either way, so I go back there the next day. They clean my teeth. I'm like, yeah, I'm supposed to be basically getting impressions done, right? So impressions, I thought that all they do is they basically mirror your teeth and stuff like that, prepare the teeth, and then they put on the caps or whatever it is. So after the cleaning, they're like, yeah, you're going to be getting your impressions done in an hour. Okay, cool. So meanwhile, like he's like whittling away on my teeth, like getting them prepared and stuff like that. And I'm like, all right, cool. Like he's been whittling away at my teeth for over an hour now. And I actually kind of have to go pee. I was like, do you mind if I see my teeth? I look at my mouth. I'm like, where are my teeth? My teeth are missing. Like they literally whittled them away. I looked like a cartoon character, like a bad cartoon character. My teeth were so small. They whittled like half my teeth away. And I'm like, the gaps are huge. I could like see my gum in between my teeth and stuff. I'm like, all I'm thinking is, I'm in Mexico right now. This guy just literally removed all my teeth. My mouth is fucked. What the hell is going on? What did I get myself into? I'm about to cry, man. He's like, wait, did you not know what you were getting into? I'm like, what do you mean? I was like, are you going to take my kidneys next or something? And that's all that's going through my head. I'm down in Mexico with a random dentist that I don't even know. I didn't even have an appointment. They just set it up for me. And I'm like, he's like, okay, we'll pull up some pictures and we'll show you what the procedure is that we're doing right now. The doctor felt so bad. And then I was like, do you mind if I go to the bathroom and take like a little breather? And I walk outside and Caroline's sitting there and I'm like, I'm so upset right now. And then I just like go to the bathroom, go pee, walk back in. She's like, let me see your teeth. I was like, you're not going to have sex with me for a year if you see my mouth. And it was that bad. Like no joke, it was that bad. And sure enough, then she sees my teeth and she's like, oh, don't worry, they'll look really good. And she's like keeping her cool, right? And then I go back in the room and meanwhile, I'm still shitting my pants, right? And then he makes me more comfortable with the situation. I'm like, I'm already balls deep in this thing. Like, just do it. And so he keeps going. And then he gives me like, he actually stopped the procedure to make temporaries for me to put in my mouth so I could see what my smile would look like. And then he like went back to the procedure. So I had to get anesthesia twice, like local anesthesia where they inject the gums.
Yeah.
And then he finished whittling my teeth and stuff like that. Put the temporaries in, went back the next day, got my teeth plugged in. And here I am with a brand new smile. Couldn't be happier. So.
And here I am with a gap in my teeth.
Yeah. Well, so you know how my smile looked, right? Like I had pretty much normal teeth for the most part, besides a gap on the left-hand side.
Yeah.
And so my teeth, the gap was as big as yours from no gap at all.
Oh,
that's why I was like, bro, what did I get myself into? I was like, God gave me this mouth and this mouth is ruined now.
Yeah, right. That's hilarious.